Welcome to Shop Talk Express. Tom, you're the Director of Security Ops at PDI. I guess cybersecurity is one of those issues which is really, really vital to retailers, but we don't always hear a lot about it. It doesn't always get the attention it deserves, does it?
Hey Dan, no, great to be here. It's one of those topics that you hear a lot about. You wonder about whether it's something that you should be concerned about, depending on size, depending on your customer base. How many stores and locations and all that kind of stuff. But you're really not sure. And so what we find is a lot of people talk about it. Shows like this, things like this. You see, you hear. And unfortunately, it goes to the kind of back of the mind. But the reality is we see, especially within our customer base, we see attacks occurring multiple times a day across, all of our customers. And it really isn't a situation that has to be addressed or thought about, by everyone.
What are some of the emerging threats that you see and which we should be prepared for as an industry, Tom?
Sure. Things like ransomware, everybody's heard about it. We've been hearing about it for years. We've been hearing about malware attacks and things like that. And those are all still very prevalent in what we see. One of the big ones that we've really started to see in a lot of instances and incidents is something that is being called extortionware. So extortionware is the same concept of what you saw in ransomware, except that the data that is being encrypted is actually being stolen first. And what this really is there to do is to provide an avenue for these threat actors and these attackers to have kind of secondary mechanisms to get that financial gain. Because if somebody who they attack just restores their files or puts things back due to other IT processes they may have, then the attackers and the threat actors, they still want that financial capability. And that's where the extortionware comes in, being able to say, hey, I've got your data. I want X amount of dollars to not release this data publicly, which could be confidential. It could violate, the release of that data could violate compliance laws, privacy laws, et cetera. And so that's really where you're starting to see some evolution occurring in those threat actors and what they're doing.
Well, I think it's really interesting to highlight this. I guess to your point, if there are supply chain issues, if there are labor issues, then we see a lot of chat around that on LinkedIn, don't we? Very publicly. These kind of things don't get talked about, but they're happening all the time. And I guess it's really useful for the industry to figure out where the key threats are. What are the specific areas to that point that our industry is most at risk, do you think?
So what we're really seeing is, whether you're a mid-size, small, like I mentioned before, it really doesn't matter the size. We're seeing a lot of threats and attacks coming in various different ways. So there's been a huge proliferation of movement to e-commerce or, self-service type, interactions. Those and exposing those systems, exposing new technologies, oftentimes in a public way, leads to a lot of avenues for threat actors to try and exploit, especially if it was kind of set in place. It was in a rush to get it up and running. You're not trying to impact business, so you just want it up and running. And the reality is that if those haven't been checked or maintained or validated for security threats, then those could be you're basically opening a door to a threat actor into the environment. The other we're seeing a lot is third-party vendors that customers may use. So if you've got somebody coming in and working on your POS systems or working on various systems within your organization, your stores, et cetera, those could be avenues for attack. And it may not be that they're being malicious, but they're opening up doors of bringing in malware into the environment, potentially from another environment. They may not have as strong security controls as what you may be doing internally, but you're still allowing them into the systems. You're still allowing them at remote administrative access, for instance. And what that really does is open an avenue for threat actors to say, hey, if we go after these service providers and get access to what the service providers have access to, then it opens a door to not just one customer or one organization, but it could open many doors. And so we're really seeing those threats be prevalent against these kinds of stores and environments.
What kind of profile of retailer is being attacked? Are they just the largest retailers?
No, absolutely not. In fact, we're seeing again attacks against those larger retailers. But the reality is that the quicker wins, from these threat actors are against that mid-size and that smaller, because you're not going to have as robust security controls. Typically, you're not going to have the same types of systems in place and incident response processes and things like that. So your dwell time, what we call dwell time, is the amount of time that the attacker can be in the environment without anybody noticing. It's the amount of time they can capture more data, they can learn more about the customer, and in reality, it gives them a higher value financially to getting a lot of these smaller mid-size versus spending all that time and effort trying to get into a larger environment. So really, nobody specifically is being targeted in a lot of cases, but you are seeing it really, no matter what size you are.
Well, unfortunately, that does make sense. What can our industry do to protect ourselves, Tom?
So a lot of it is really understanding what your threats are. So do you have remote facing systems? Do you not have remote facing systems? Who are your vendors? And what are the policies that they're using, and how are they, securing their own environments? And then kind of looking internally. So setting up a system in place or an incident response, for instance, just see something, say something, however you want to phrase it, but being able to work with your teams internally and saying, okay, if you see something odd, if you see somebody working on a system that you've never known before, are you validating all these different, processes that are going on? And then working on having security tools in place to be that gatekeeper, for instance, having a robust set of security tools, prevention technologies, and then layering that in potentially with third parties and MSSPs and things like that. Those are really good steps, and they help you not have to learn it all on your own per se, but leveraging a third party who really focuses on that primarily, and let them be the experts, and work with you on reinforcing the security of your systems.
Well, when we started, we were chatting about which day is the worst day, for doing your job in terms of the numbers of threats. I guess the thing about this is it's 7 days a week, isn't it?
It is. It's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And what that really means is when you look at a traditional, organization, company, they're going to be looking at, potentially 1 or 2 shifts in that 24-hour period, sometimes 24/7. But you're not thinking about the IT aspect, in that 24/7. You're not thinking of the security aspect. These threats are coming from everywhere in the world, and so there isn't, a 9 to 5, so to say, for these kinds of threat actors. So it really is 24/7, 365.
Absolutely. Well, it's been very interesting, Tom. I mean, as you know, there's a detailed feature from PDI in the tech section of our Global Convenience Store Focus website, if you'd like to look at that. And I think this is a really important area to highlight. So thank you for joining us on Shop Talk Express today.
Agreed. Thank you very much.